Welcome to this week's session of Fridays on the Farm. Today we're going to talk about some of the chute side things that go into preconditioning. We'll talk a little bit about vaccination, putting in ear tags, castration, and show you at least one kind of deworming. As we get ready to work chute side on these calves, one of the things we want to do is make sure everything's set out. When we talk about vaccines, we have our killed vaccines and modified live. This is an example of a modified live vaccine. If we can do at least one round of modified lives on these preconditioned calves, that'll help maximize our profits. In this specific case, we have our killed vaccine, which is our Clostridial and blackleg, and then our modified live is our respiratory vaccine. It's going to come with one part that's been dried, and then it's going to come with a sterile diluent. In this case, our sterile diluent also contains our Mannheima hemolytica. So what we'll do is we'll do this with a clean needle every time. We'll draw up our diluent and mix it in. And we want to make sure that we get everything mixed together, and we only do this per bottle at a time as we use it. We don't want to mix all these on the front end and run the risk of decreasing the efficacy of our vaccine. It's also important that our extra vaccine is staying inside of a cooler or somewhere else that's dark and cold so that we don't run the risk of hurting it either. Today we have an extremely sophisticated vaccine cooler. This is just an insulated lunchbox that most everybody has one laying around. Another option you can do to make your life easier, once you have that vaccine mixed up, we also have these pistol syringes. This is going to draw up about the amount that's in this bottle, or less than 10 doses, which is how many calves we want to change the needle out in between as well. This gun also has a place where we can set the dosage so that we can make sure each calf gets the proper dose as we go through the process. It's important when we go to clean these vaccine syringes that we get them good and clean. We'll use sterile hot water. We never use soap because any leftover soap residue could hurt our vaccines the next time we go to use it. As we go to vaccinate these calves, we want to make sure we're following all the BQA practices. Work from the neck of these calves. It's important that we use the tent method, and so we're going to come in and show you everything we do. All the vaccines we give are all subcutaneous. We want to use a 16 to an 18 gauge needle, anywhere from a ½ inch to an 1.5 inches long. To use the tent method, we're going to pinch a little bit of skin in this triangle, go right into the skin, and then we're done. For our next shot, we're going to move over a hand width from where we gave the last one. For our third shot, which is the injectable boomer, we come over to the other side of the calf and do it in the neck, under the skin, just like we did the others. Record keeping is really important for these calves. So we're going to tag these calves. Today we are using the Natural State Preconditioned Go Green tags. You want to put these in the center of the ear. It is a Z tag. So that's all there is to it. A closer version, when we go to ear tag these calves, this calf already has one form of identification he probably got when he was born. There's a hole. We're going to go right here in the center of his ear between those major veins. And it's as easy as that. Castration is just one of the tools in your toolbox to help maximize your profits and is essential if you're selling preconditioned calves. Your steer calves are always preferred over the bull calves in the feeder market. Bull calves should be castrated if you don't plan on keeping them for breeding calves in the future. Castration is just one of the tools in your toolbox to help maximize your profits and is essential if you're selling preconditioned calves. Your steer calves are always preferred over the bull calves in the feeder market. Bull calves should be castrated if you don't plan on keeping them for breeding calves in the future. Castration is just one of the tools in your toolbox to help maximize your profits and is essential if you're selling preconditioned calves. Your steer calves are always preferred over the bull calves in the feeder market. Bull calves should be castrated if you don't plan on keeping them for breeding calves in the future. Castration can be done best the younger those calves are. It's less stress on the calves, and the older they are, the more difficult they're going to be to restrain, and the greater the setback they're going to suffer. Some cattlemen even get a hold of their calves as newborns and go ahead and handle it then to make it easier on everybody. Today we're going to talk about 3 types of castration. That's surgical, emasculation, and elastration. When we look a little bit at the anatomy of these bull calves, you have the testicle that's housed inside the scrotum, which is what we're trying to remove. The first method that we're going to talk about is surgical castration. This is done with either a scalpel or a Newberry knife like you see featured here, and is one of the most positive methods because you know what you're getting. To get started, that young calf is restrained. The lower third of the scrotum is opened with either the scalpel or the Newberry knife, and then the testicles are then pushed out one at a time through that incision where it separates from the membranes. The spermatic cord is then severed. This can be done by scraping it with a knife blade, and some people can even do it by scraping their fingers. Once those testicles are removed, it's important that we use an antiseptic to that wound. If it's during fly season, I also always recommend an insect repellent. The first tool we're going to use today is the surgical option. This is called a Newberry knife. And we'll use the Newberry knife to cut off the bottom third of the sac. We'll pull those testicles out, tear through the spermatic cord, and he'll be done. Emasculation or clamping is another option that's bloodless. Each cord should be carefully crushed separately. We want to make certain to leave the median unclamped so that blood can continue to circulate into that scrotum. We also have the emasculator. This is going to slide over the scrotum and crimp and clamp and crush that spermatic cord as well. Henderson tool. We'll cut open that bottom third of the sac. We're going to clamp this onto the spermatic cord, and as that drill spins, it'll pull everything loose and pull those testicles and cause very little blood loss.
Alright, you're going to take the Newberry tool, you're going to come down here to the bottom third of the sac.
Okay.
So, and then those testicles fall out.
Sometimes a knife works even better than a scalpel.
Pull that sac out, and that testicle. And what that does is it crimps.
This is the Henderson tool.
It just crimps it off, makes it really a nice tight connection where he's not going to bleed just a whole lot.
The last method we're going to cover is elastration, or some people call it banding, and is another really common method. It's really easy. You catch these calves, you're going to slide this over the scrotum above the testicles and leave the band, which is going to in turn cut off circulation and eventually cause that scrotum and testicles to fall off. Because we're cutting off circulation, it also gives us a really high risk of tetanus or other infections, so it's important that those bull calves get a tetanus shot. Also, one thing to keep in mind is because we're sliding this, we're giving it time to work. There's also more errors with bands than anything else. Sometimes those bands may be dry rotted and may pop right off and you may still have two testicles. Sometimes one may slip up and you end up only losing one testicle and you still have calves that are intact. If you are banding these preconditioned calves, it's important that before they're sold as preconditioned that they have lost both testicles. So you may need to go back in and double check. This is an example of a banding gun for a smaller calf. They do make larger ones if you're trying to castrate larger calves. And we're going to pull this all the way apart, go up over his scrotum, turn it loose, that band will stay, and he'll be done. And in anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, he won't have a scrotum or testicles anymore. We'll open this up, slide it up and over the scrotum, turn it loose, and then the band will stay. Dehorning is another practice that can really help you maximize your profit for those calves because cattle without horns attract preference over horned cattle. Hornless cattle require less space in transit in the feedlot and in the feed bunks. They'll fight less and inflict fewer injuries on each other, which can improve the quality of meat in the long run. There are several methods of dehorning. Today we're going to look at genetic options, chemical, spoon or tube dehorners, hot irons, barn types, and even a few options for larger horns. To get started, let's look a little bit at the anatomy of where the horns are. If you have a small enough calf that you only have buds, we cut them at the surface level, right in front of that frontal sinus. If you have larger horns, you are going to cut a little bit into the frontal sinus when we go to remove those. Genetic dehorning is the easiest method you can do. When we talked about sire selection, one of the things we talked about was selecting a polled bull, meaning he doesn't have horns. If you have a homozygous bull who is polled, you are guaranteed to have polled calves, which means you won't have to worry about dehorning anything. Even if you have a heterozygous polled bull, if you have homozygous polled cows, you wouldn't have to worry about dehorning either. But let's look at this chart a little bit. This comes out of one of the University of Arkansas Extension fact sheets. But if you take that heterozygous polled bull, meaning he may not have horns, but he does carry that recessive gene, and you turn him out on horned cattle, you're still going to get horned calves. If you have questions on bull selection, you can look back at our series, or you can always call the office and ask us questions. As we talk about dehorning, this farm may not have been our best option for this week's Fridays on the Farm because all these cows are genetically dehorned. They were all sired by a polled bull, so all of these calves are already polled. That's going to save us time and be a little easier to work and less stress on these calves. The first option we're going to look at is chemical dehorning. This is an option for really young calves. We're talking less than 3 weeks old. You can get a paste or a stick that you put it on the button. You'll start with clipping the hair from the horn button and apply a little bit of petroleum jelly below the area so that we can protect the calf's eyes from this paste. Once you apply the paste around the button, make sure you keep the calf in a dry area. You also want to keep that calf away from its mom until it's dry or hardened. Make sure you're also careful that you don't get this on yourself. Be sure to avoid contact with your skin and your eyes if you're doing something like this. And again, this is with our really young calves. If they're 3 weeks old, you don't want to go this route. These spoon or tube dehorners are the next step options if you've got a little bit bigger calves, but it's also important that these are horn buttons or small horns that have just emerged to be so that they're easily removed with these kind of dehorners. The tube must be large enough to fit over the base of the horn, and we want it to include about 1/8 of an inch of hair around the horn. You push and twist until the skin's been cut through, and then you use the cutting edge of the tube to cut through or scoop out the horn and remove it. Because we are cutting into the calf, it's also important we use that antiseptic and maybe even an insect repellent depending on the time of the year. Hot irons are one of the most common methods of dehorners. It takes a little bit extra work because most of these are going to require an electric hookup, but they can be used to dehorn calves with buttons or even those small horns. Fire heated irons usually come in sets, so the proper size can be selected to fit over the base. If you're going to use a fire heated, make sure you heat that iron to a dull red so that it's working. If you're using an electrically heated iron, these are designed to maintain the proper temperature, but make sure that it's hot enough before you get started. Success with these hot irons really depends on holding that iron in place long enough to destroy the ring of growth cells around the base of the horn. This method of dehorning is practically bloodless and can be one of the best methods available when used properly on the right size calf. The next method we're going to look at is for the Barnes type dehorner. Maybe you don't have an ability to get a hold of those calves when they're young. This can be an option for a little bit larger calf with larger horns, but it is also going to be a little bit messier. While these are good for large horns, it's also important that they're small enough for the instrument to fit properly and permit cutting a ring of skin and hair around the base. The Barnes type dehorners are available in calf and yearling sizes. That's why you see 2 sets here. The way these work is you close the handles to fit the blades around the base of the horn and slide it all the way down. Then you're going to spread the handles and twist with a little bit of pressure against the skull, which removes the horn. This is also going to cause a lot of hemorrhaging. That can be controlled by pulling those exposed arteries with a set of forceps. You can also apply non-irritating antiseptic and fly repellent depending on the time of the year. Sometimes we even have larger horns than that. Hopefully, if these are calves that you are weaning and backgrounding, you don't have these larger horns, but just in case, you could use a saw in extreme cases. There are clippers like these, or even a wire option if you need it. For more information on castration and dehorning, and even on just preconditioning calves, be sure to check out our University of Arkansas Extension website. If you go to uaex.edu/gogreen, not only can you pull up information about our natural state preconditioned calf program, but you can also find out is marketing these calves right for you. We also have fact sheets that you can see the links to here that talk about castration and dehorning methods in general. And always remember, if you've got questions, don't hesitate to give us a call at the office. I'd love to come out to your place and help you walk through some of these things or answer any questions you may have. Thank you for joining us for this week's session on Fridays at the Farm. Next week, we're going to finish out our preconditioning series. We're going to talk about how to feed these guys and how to get to the best bottom line. See you next Friday.